I stared at the glossy business card between my fingers, running my thumb over the embossed letters, Hart and Lynch's, where tradition meets innovation. In just 2 hours, we'd open our doors to the public. 6 years of dreaming, planning, and sacrificing had led to this moment. If only I knew then that the card in my hand would become evidence of the biggest betrayal of my life. My name is Sadie, and this was supposed to be the happiest day of my career. Instead, it became the day I learned who my husband really was. Everything looks perfect, Aurora said, adjusting a centerpiece on one of the tables. My sister had always been my biggest cheerleader, especially through the countless sleepless nights spent perfecting every detail of the restaurant. I nodded, but something felt off. Dominic had been distant all morning, huddled in corners with his phone, speaking in hushed tones. When I approached, he'd quickly end his calls and flash that $1,000,000 smile that had made me fall for him in the first place. "Where's Dom?" Aurora asked, echoing my thoughts. "Probably in his office, making last-minute calls to suppliers," I replied, though we both knew that wasn't true. Our head chef, Lexi, handled all supplier relations. The kitchen door swung open, and Lexi emerged, her chef's whites pristine. "Sadie, you need to see this," she said, her face tight with concern. I followed her to the kitchen, where the staff was gathered around a laptop. On screen was our restaurant's website, but something was wrong. My name was gone. Every mention of Hart and Lynch's had been replaced with just Lynch's. "What the hell?" I whispered, my hands trembling as I scrolled through the pages. "There's more," Lexi said softly, sliding a stack of papers across the counter. New contracts, new letterhead, new business cards, all without my name. The office door opened and Dominic walked out, adjusting his tie. He froze when he saw me holding the papers. "Ah," he said, his voice eerily calm. "I was going to tell you after the opening." "Tell me what?" My voice cracked. "The restaurant is mine, Sadie, solely mine. The paperwork was finalized this morning." The kitchen fell silent. Even the humming of the refrigerator seemed to stop. "What are you talking about? We built this together. My savings were a contribution," he cut in. "A generous one, I'll admit. But legally, this establishment belongs to me." Aurora stepped forward. "You can't do this, Dominic. She's your wife." "Actually, I can, and I have." He pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "These documents show that Sadie signed over her rights to the business 3 months ago." "I never signed anything." I grabbed the papers, my eyes scanning the signature. It looked like mine, but "This is forged." "Prove it," he said with a smirk. "In the meantime, I need everyone to focus. We have a restaurant to open in less than 2 hours. Lexi stepped forward. "I quit." "No, you don't," I said quickly, placing a hand on her arm. "Stay, please." I turned to Dominic. "You want to play this game? Fine. But remember, you taught me everything you know about the restaurant business. Everything." His smirk faltered slightly. I walked to my office, his office now, apparently, and went straight to the bottom drawer. With trembling hands, I unlocked it and retrieved a thick manila envelope I'd stashed there months ago when I first noticed something wasn't right with our accounts. "What's that?" Aurora asked as I emerged. "Insurance," I replied, loud enough for Dominic to hear. "You're not the only one who keeps papers, darling." His face paled slightly, but he maintained his composure. "The guests will be arriving soon. We should all get ready." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, Aurora close behind me. At the threshold, I turned back to face my husband. "Congratulations on your new restaurant, Dom. I hope you're ready for what comes next." "Is that a threat?" he called after me. "No," I said, patting the envelope. "It's a promise." Outside, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Aurora wrapped an arm around my shoulders as tears finally spilled down my cheeks. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I wiped my eyes, smearing expensive mascara across my face. "First, I'm going to call Louis. Then, I'm going to destroy everything Dominic loves, starting with his precious reputation." "I'm with you," Aurora said firmly. "All the way." I clutched the envelope tighter, feeling the weight of its contents. Bank statements, suspicious transfers, and emails that would make any tax auditor salivate. Dominic thought he had won, but he'd forgotten one crucial detail. I wasn't just his wife. I was his business partner, and he had just declared war. Lewis's office smelled of leather and old books, a sharp contrast to the chaos of the past 24 hours. He studied the documents spread across his mahogany desk, occasionally adjusting his reading glasses. "This is quite something, Sadie," he said, holding up a bank statement. "These transfers, they're not just suspicious, they're damning." Aurora sat beside me, scrolling through her phone. "The restaurant's opening is all over social media. People are raving about it." She paused. "And Dominic's giving interviews, taking all the credit." "Let him," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "How long until we can make our move, Louis?" He leaned back in his chair. "The good news is, you were smart to keep records. The bad news? That forged signature complicates things." "I never signed those papers," I insisted. "I believe you." Louis pulled out a fresh document. "And this proves it. Your actual signature from 3 months ago, on your lease renewal. The strokes are different. We can get a handwriting expert to verify." A knock at the door interrupted us. Louis's assistant poked her head in. "Andrea's here for your appointment." Aurora squeezed my hand. "I told you she'd come." A tall woman with sharp eyes and a reporter's notebook entered. "Sadie, I'm Andrea from the Daily Chronicle. Aurora filled me in on some details, but I'd love to hear your side of the story." "Before we start," Louis interjected, "everything discussed here is off the record until we give explicit permission." Andrea nodded, taking a seat. "Of course, but when this breaks, it'll be explosive. A husband stealing his wife's business on opening day? That's headline material." "It's more than that," I said, sliding some papers toward her. "Look at these transfers. Small amounts, spread over months, always under 10,000 to avoid scrutiny." Andrea's eyes widened as she scanned the documents. "This is money laundering territory." "Exactly," Louis said. "And there's more. Sadie, show her the email from last week." I pulled up the message on my phone. Dominic thought he deleted it, but I had already forwarded it to myself. It's a conversation with someone named Marcus about cleaning the restaurant's initial investment money. "Your husband's not just a thief," Andrea said, scribbling notes. "He's involved in something much bigger." Aurora's phone buzzed. "Speaking of bigger problems, Hamza just posted about expanding his restaurant chain. He's targeting our neighborhood." "Lexi's brother?" I asked. "The rival restaurateur? He's probably hoping to capitalize on this drama." Andrea mused. "Family feuds make for good business opportunities." Louis cleared his throat. "Let's focus on one battle at a time. Sadie, there's something else you should know about Dominic's finances." He pulled out another folder, this one marked with red flags. "Your husband has a pattern. Before you, he was involved in 2 other failed business ventures. Both times his partners lost everything while he walked away clean." "How did I not know this?" My voice cracked. "Because he's good at covering his tracks," Louis replied, "but not good enough. His mother, Sarah, reached out to me this morning." "Sarah contacted you?" The woman had always been polite but distant. "She's worried about you, and she has information, documents from Dominic's previous ventures. She wants to meet." Andrea leaned forward. "A mother turning against her son? That adds another layer to the story." This isn't just about the story, I snapped. This is my life. You're right, Andrea said softly. But public opinion can be a powerful weapon. Use it. Aurora stood up suddenly. Sadie, look at this. She turned her phone toward me. On the screen was a social media post from Dominic, a photo of him in his restaurant, caption reading Living the Dream I Built from Scratch. My hands clenched into fists. From scratch? I sold my car to buy our first industrial stove. I worked double shifts at that diner for 3 years to save up. We'll make him pay, Lewis assured me, legally and publicly. When? I demanded. Give me 48 hours to file the initial paperwork. Andrea can have her story ready to break by then. But first, you need to meet with Sarah. I nodded, gathering my things. Set it up. And Andrea, when this story breaks, I want it to burn everything he's built to the ground. It will, she promised. But are you ready for the fallout? This won't just expose Dominic. It'll expose your marriage, your private life. I thought about the business card I'd been holding yesterday morning, about all the dreams it represented. My marriage was exposed the moment he betrayed me. Now it's time for justice. As we left Lewis's office, Aurora linked her arm through mine. You know what Mom always said? The truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose and it will defend itself. I smiled for the first time in 24 hours. Then let's set it loose. The restaurant's kitchen was eerily quiet at 3 a.m. Lexi had let me in through the back door, both of us moving like thieves in what should have been my own space. He changed all the security codes, Lexi whispered, but forgot about the manual key I keep for emergencies. She flicked on a small light over the prep station. We have about an hour before the morning prep team arrives. I headed straight for Dominic's office, my heart pounding. Has he been acting suspicious? Like you wouldn't believe. Lexi followed, keeping watch. Yesterday, he had a meeting with these sketchy-looking guys. They were talking about some offshore accounts. The office door was locked, but I knew Dominic's habits. I reached above the door frame, finding the spare key exactly where it had always been. Some things never change. Got it, I said, unlocking the door. Keep watch? Lexi nodded, taking position by the kitchen entrance. Inside, everything looked different. My photos were gone, replaced by pretentious art pieces. I went straight for the hidden safe behind one of them, another of Dominic's predictable habits. My phone buzzed. A text from Aurora. Andrea's story is ready. She found 3 more victims from Dom's past ventures. All women, all lost everything. I typed back quickly. Perfect timing. In his office now, looking for proof. The safe opened with our wedding date. Again, predictable. Inside, I found exactly what I was looking for. A thick folder labeled Marcus Ventures. Sadie! Lexi's urgent whisper came from the doorway. Someone's here. I quickly photographed every page in the folder, my hands shaking as I heard voices approaching. Just as I closed the safe and replaced the art piece, the kitchen lights flicked on. Hide, Lexi mouthed, disappearing from view. I ducked behind the desk just as Dominic's voice filled the kitchen. The numbers aren't adding up, Marcus. We need to move faster. Patience, a gruff voice replied. The money needs time to clean. Your wife's investment complicated things. Ex-wife soon enough, Dominic said. Once this deal goes through, I'm filing for divorce. She'll get nothing. I bit my lip to keep from gasping. My phone buzzed again, Aurora asking if I was safe. I silenced it quickly. What about the chef? Marcus asked. She seems loyal to your wife. Lexi, she'll fall in line or she's gone. I've already got a replacement lined up. Their voices moved closer to the office. I looked around desperately for an escape route. The window was too small, and the only door led straight to where they were standing. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the kitchen, followed by Lexi's voice. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I came in early to prep and knocked over the pots. Mr. Lynch, I didn't know you'd be here. What are you doing here at this hour? Dominic demanded. Testing new recipes. You said you wanted the menu updated. Their voices moved away from the office. I seized my chance, slipping out and making my way to the back door. Outside, the cool air hit my face as I ran to my car parked 2 blocks away. 20 minutes later, I sat in a 24-hour diner with Lexi, both of us still shaking. That was too close, she said, stirring her coffee. But worth it. Did you find anything? I showed her the photos on my phone. More than enough. Look at these numbers. He's been laundering money through the restaurant since before we opened. My phone rang. Andrea. Tell me you have something, she said without greeting. I'm holding the story for your evidence. Sending everything now, but there's more. I recounted what we'd overheard. He's planning to divorce me, leave me with nothing. Not if we move first, Andrea replied. With these documents and the testimonies I've gathered, we can run the story tomorrow. Lexi touched my arm. There's something else you should know. I got a letter from Sarah yesterday. She pulled an envelope from her bag. She asked me to give it to you privately. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single page of Sarah's elegant handwriting. Dearest Sadie, what my son has done is unforgivable. You should know that this pattern started with his father. The same betrayal, the same schemes. I enabled it then by staying silent. I won't make that mistake again. In my safe deposit box at First National Box 247, you'll find everything you need to prove the forgery. The key is taped to the back of this letter. With love and regret, Sarah. Sure enough, a small key was attached. First National opens in 4 hours, Lexi said, checking her watch. I looked at the key, then at my phone displaying the damning evidence. Perfect, because in 5 hours, Dominic's whole world is going to come crashing down. Are you ready for this? Lexi asked. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. Sarah's house looked exactly as I remembered it. Pristine white walls and perfectly manicured roses. I hadn't been here since last Christmas, when everything still seemed perfect. Now, standing on her doorstep, I felt like a stranger. I wasn't sure you'd come, Sarah said, opening the door before I could knock. She looked older somehow, worn down by worry. Please, come in. The living room was filled with photo albums and boxes of documents spread across her antique coffee table. I've been up all night, she explained, gesturing to the chaos. After I sent that letter, I kept finding more evidence. She picked up a photo. This was Dominic's father on the day he left us. He was smiling just like always. Hours later, I discovered he'd emptied our accounts. Like father, like son, I muttered. I blamed myself for not seeing the signs. Sarah's hands trembled as she poured tea. When Dominic started showing the same traits, I told myself it was different, that he'd learned from his father's mistakes, not his methods. Why didn't you warn me? Would you have believed me? She met my eyes. Love makes us blind, Sadie. I watched you fall for the same charm that caught me 30 years ago. A car door slammed outside. Sarah rushed to the window. It's okay, just the neighbors. You're afraid of him finding me here? I'm afraid of him finding these. She pulled out a stack of documents from a box. Bank statements, forged signatures, fake companies, his father's old playbook, and now Dominic's. I flipped through the papers. These go back years. To his very first venture, a small cafe he opened with his college girlfriend. She invested everything she had. Sarah's voice cracked. When she discovered the truth, he threatened to destroy her reputation if she went public. How many others? 3 that I know of. All women who trusted him. All destroyed financially and emotionally. My phone buzzed. A text from Aurora. Urgent. Hamza is meeting with Dominic right now. Something about buying the restaurant. He's trying to sell it? I showed Sarah the message. Of course he is. Sarah stood abruptly, walking to her study. He always runs when the walls close in, just like his father. She returned with a leather portfolio. These are the original documents for your restaurant, the real ones before he forged the new versions. I I made copies when he asked me to notarize them. You knew? I suspected, but this time I kept evidence. She gripped my hand. Use it, Sadie. Stop him before he does this to someone else. Another text from Aurora. Andrea's story goes live in 2 hours. Lewis has the injunction ready. Sarah, I said carefully, once this breaks, everything changes. Your son could go to jail. Maybe that's what he needs. She walked to a cabinet and pulled out a bottle of wine. This was supposed to be for your first restaurant anniversary. Instead, let's drink to your liberation. As she poured the wine, I noticed her hands were steady now. You seem calmer. Because for the first time in decades, I'm doing the right thing. She handed me a glass. When Dominic was little, I taught him that actions have consequences. Somewhere along the way, he forgot that lesson. It's time to remind him. My phone rang. Lexi. Sadie, you need to get back here, she said urgently. Hamza just left, and Dominic's ordering the staff to clear out the restaurant tonight. He's planning to sell everything and run. Not if I can help it, I replied, gathering the documents. Lexi, stall him. I'm on my way. Sarah grabbed my arm as I stood. Wait, there's one more thing you should know. She pulled out an old newspaper clipping. His father didn't just run away. He's in prison in Miami. Tax fraud, money laundering, exactly what Dominic's doing now. Does Dominic know? No. I told him his father was living in Europe, but maybe it's time he learned the truth about his role model. As I headed for the door, Sarah called after me. Sadie, when you confront him, be careful. Men like Dominic and his father, they're most dangerous when cornered. I'm not afraid of him anymore. Good. She smiled sadly. Because he should be afraid of you. Outside, my phone buzzed again. Aurora had sent a photo, Dominic shaking hands with Hamza in front of the restaurant. I started my car, the portfolio of evidence secure beside me. In the rearview mirror, I saw Sarah standing in her doorway, straight and strong, no longer the enabler of her son's crimes, but my ally in exposing them. 2 hours until Andrea's story broke. 1 hour until Lewis filed the injunction. 30 minutes until I reached the restaurant. Dominic thought he could run away from this, just like his father did. But he forgot one crucial detail. His father never had to face someone like me. The restaurant's bar was empty except for me, Aurora, Lexi, and Andrea. Outside, the night pressed against the windows, while we waited for morning, and everything that would come with it. 1 hour until the story goes live, Andrea said, checking her laptop. The editor's already calling it the story of the year. Lexi poured us each a glass of wine. To think, this time yesterday, we were preparing for a grand opening. And now we're preparing for a takedown, Aurora added, raising her glass. How are you holding up, sis? I stared at the wedding photo still hanging behind the bar. Me in white, Dominic in his perfect suit, both of us smiling. I keep thinking about our first date. He talked about wanting to own a restaurant for hours. I thought his passion was beautiful. It wasn't passion, Lexi said quietly. It was greed. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You think you're clever digging up dirt? Back off now, or you'll regret it. Look at this. I showed them the message. Marcus? Andrea asked, already typing notes. Has to be. Aurora replied. Dominic's too arrogant to send threats himself. The kitchen door swung open and Lewis walked in, carrying his briefcase. Good news and bad news. The injunction is ready, but Hamza's lawyers are fighting back. They're claiming he's already paid a deposit on the restaurant. He can't sell what isn't legally his, I said. Exactly, but Lewis was interrupted by the front door opening. Hamza walked in, his expensive suit out of place in our casual setting. Private party? We're closed, Lexi snapped, stepping forward protectively. Now, is that any way to talk to the new owner? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Sadie, we should talk, privately. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of everyone. He shrugged, taking a seat at the bar. Fine, I'm offering you a deal. Drop whatever you're planning, and I'll give you 10% of the purchase price. Andrea's fingers flew across her keyboard, documenting every word. Not interested, I replied. 20% then. That's more than fair, considering you have no legal claim to this place anymore. Lewis cleared his throat. Actually, I know about the forged documents, Hamza cut in. I know about Marcus, the money laundering, all of it. That's why I'm offering you an out. Aurora stood up. Are you threatening my sister? I'm trying to help her. He turned back to me. You go public with this, everyone gets hurt. The staff loses their jobs. The neighborhood loses a landmark restaurant. Your reputation gets dragged through the mud. Is revenge worth all that? This isn't about revenge, I said, my voice steady. It's about justice. Justice, he laughed. Look around, Sadie. This is business. There are no heroes or villains, just winners and losers. Right now, you can still walk away a winner. My phone buzzed again. Another anonymous text. Last warning, walk away. I showed it to Hamza. Your friend Marcus is texting me threats. His expression flickered. I don't know anything about that. Really? Because in 30 minutes, Andrea's story breaks. It details everything: the money laundering, the previous victims, your involvement in trying to buy stolen property. You're bluffing. Andrea turned her laptop around, showing him the article's preview. His face paled as he read the headline. You'll never survive the legal battles, he warned. Maybe not, Lewis interjected, but the FBI will be very interested in these financial records. Hamza stood abruptly. You have no idea what you're getting into. Neither do you, Lexi said. The staff isn't going anywhere. We're all behind Sadie. He straightened his tie, trying to maintain composure. This isn't over. Actually, it is, I said, standing to face him. In 28 minutes, this story goes public. In 29 minutes, Lewis files the injunction. And in 30 minutes, your reputation as a legitimate businessman evaporates. You're making a mistake, he said, heading for the door. No, you made the mistake, Aurora called after him. You chose the wrong side. After he left, we sat in tense silence until Andrea's phone chimed. Editor just moved up the timeline, she announced. Story goes live in 5 minutes. I picked up my wine glass, looking at that wedding photo one last time. Lexi, take that down, please. As she removed the photo, I raised my glass. To new beginnings. To justice, Aurora added. To the truth, Andrea said, hitting the publish button on her laptop. My phone immediately lit up with notifications. The story was out. There was no going back now. Ready? Lewis asked, briefcase in hand. I took one last look around the restaurant. My restaurant. Ready. The morning sun streamed through the restaurant's windows as local news vans gathered outside. Dominic burst through the front door, his perfectly pressed suit wrinkled, his face red with rage. What have you done? He shouted, waving his phone. The story's everywhere. Good morning to you, too, I said calmly from behind the bar, where I'd been waiting. The staff stood behind me, a united front. You've ruined everything. He tried to move toward me, but Lewis and 2 police officers stepped out from the dining area. Mr. Lynch, one officer said, we have some questions about certain financial transactions. Dominic's face went from red to white. This is ridiculous. I have rights. Yes, you do, Lewis said, pulling out a document. You have the right to explain why you forged your wife's signature. You have the right to explain the suspicious transfers. And you have the right to remain silent. You can't prove anything. Actually, Sarah's voice came from the entrance. We can prove everything. She walked in carrying another folder, including this morning's attempted sale to Hamza. Dominic staggered back. Mother, you're part of this? I'm part of the truth, she replied, something you and your father never understood. The door chimed again as Andrea walked in with a camera crew. Mind if we document this? The public seems very interested in your story. Get out, Dominic shouted. All of you. They can't leave, I said, pulling out the original ownership documents. Because this is my restaurant too. Always has been. Lexi stepped forward. The staff stays too. We all witnessed the fraud. Dominic laughed desperately. The staff, they'll say anything you tell them to. Actually, a voice called from the kitchen, they'll tell the truth. Marcus emerged, flanked by two more officers. Just like I did. Marcus? Dominic's voice cracked. What are you talking about? Your partner turned himself in this morning, one officer explained. Offered a full confession about the money laundering operation. You son of a bitch! Dominic lunged at Marcus, but the officers caught him. Don't make this worse, Lewis warned. Aurora, who had been filming everything on her phone, spoke up. The live stream has 10,000 viewers already. Want to say anything to them, Dom? He turned to me, his charm making one last appearance. Sadie, baby, we can fix this. Remember why we started this place? Our dreams? My dreams, I corrected him. You just saw an opportunity. Think about what you're doing, he pleaded. This will destroy both of us. Sarah stepped between us. No, son, you destroyed yourself, just like your father did. My father? His face contorted. He's successful in Europe. He's in prison in Miami, Sarah cut in, for the exact same crimes you committed. The officers moved forward with handcuffs as Dominic's facade finally cracked. You can't do this to me. I built this place. No, I said firmly. We built this place. I designed the layout. I created the menu with Lexi. I worked every double shift to save money. You just took the credit. Andrea's camera caught everything as the officers read him his rights. The restaurant staff applauded as they led him toward the door. Wait, I called out. Everyone froze. I walked up to Dominic, pulled out his business card from my pocket, the one with just his name on it, and ripped it in half. The restaurant keeps its original name, Hart and Lynch's. Let it remind everyone what happens when you betray the wrong person. As they took him away, Sarah touched my arm. Are you okay? Ask me tomorrow, I replied, watching through the windows as they put him in the police car. Lewis cleared his throat. The injunction was successful. The sale to Hamza is void. The restaurant is legally yours again. Ours, I corrected, looking at the staff. Everyone who stuck by me gets shares. We're making this a true family business. Lexi wiped tears from her eyes. Speaking of family, look outside. A crowd had gathered. Regular customers, neighbors, other local business owners. They were holding signs. We stand with Sadie and Hart and Lynch's forever. They're here for the reopening, Aurora explained. I might have spread the word on social media. Andrea smiled at her camera operator. Still rolling? Because this is a much better ending than we expected. I looked around at my real family, Aurora, Sarah, Lexi, the loyal staff, even Andrea and Lewis, who had fought for justice with me. Then I looked at the crowd outside, their support washing away the last traces of doubt. No, I said, walking to the front door. This isn't an ending, it's a beginning. I unlocked the door and stepped out into the sunlight, ready to greet our customers, not as the betrayed wife, but as the owner of Hart and Lynch's, where tradition really does meet innovation and where justice is always on the menu. The county jail's visiting room was colder than I remembered from TV shows. Dominic sat across from me, orange jumpsuit replacing his designer suits, his usual confidence crumbling around the edges. "You actually came," he said, trying to smile. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't." I placed a manila envelope on the table between us. "But you need to sign these." "Divorce papers?" He didn't touch them. "Can't we talk about this? Like you talked to me about stealing my restaurant?" I pushed the envelope closer. "Or about the other women you destroyed?" He flinched. "I never meant." "Save it." I pulled out a pen. "Your father's been transferred here, by the way. Same facility. Sarah thought you two should catch up." His face darkened. "My mother betrayed me." "No, she saved you. If she hadn't come forward, the FBI would have added witness tampering to your charges." "Is that why you're here? To gloat?" I leaned forward. "I'm here because yesterday I got a call from Jessica." He paled visibly. "Who?" "Your college girlfriend, the first one you destroyed. She saw Andrea's story and reached out, told me everything about that cafe you stole from her." "That was different," he protested. "I was young, desperate. Then came Rachel and the food truck, Maria and the catering company." I ticked off each name. Same pattern, different victims, until me. He stared at his hands. "What do you want from me?" "A confession, not for the courts. They already have enough evidence. For me, I want to hear you say it." Silence stretched between us. Finally, he looked up, and for once, I saw something real in his eyes. Defeat. "I saw how hard you worked," he said quietly, "how much people respected you. The restaurant was supposed to be my chance to prove myself, but everyone loved your ideas, your leadership. I got jealous. So you decided to take it all?" "I convinced myself I deserved it, that I was protecting our investment." He laughed bitterly. "I even believed my own lies." "And Marcus, the money laundering?" "Started small, just a few transactions to help some friends. Then it grew. Marcus said we could make millions. Instead, you're both facing years in prison." He picked up the pen, hands shaking slightly. "The restaurant, how is it?" "Thriving. We're opening a second location next month. Lexi's running it." "Keep the name," he said suddenly. "Hart and Lynch's. Let it remind people that you won." "I already decided to." I watched him sign the papers. "But not because I won. Because every time someone says that name, they'll remember what happens when you underestimate a woman who built something from nothing." A guard approached, signaling our time was ending. "One more thing," I said, standing. "Sarah wanted me to give you this." I placed a photo on the table, him as a child, sitting on his father's shoulders, both smiling at the camera. "She said to remember who you were before greed changed you. Maybe use your time here to find that person again." His fingers touched the photo gently. "Sadie, Goodbye, Dominic." Outside, Aurora was waiting in the car. "How'd it go?" "Better than expected." I buckled my seatbelt. He actually seemed human. My phone buzzed. A text from Andrea. "Story just won a regional journalism award. Editor wants a follow-up piece. You ready to tell the next chapter?" Another message popped up from Lewis. "FBI found 2 more victims. They want to know if you'll speak at their support group." "Look at this," Aurora said, showing me her phone. On screen was a social media post from a young entrepreneur. "Hart and Lynch's story inspired me to leave my abusive business partner. Thank you, Sadie, for showing us how to fight back." "That's the 5th message like that this week," I said. Because you didn't just take back your restaurant, Aurora replied. You gave other women a blueprint for justice. As we drove back to the restaurant, I thought about the girl in that wedding photo. So in love, so trusting. She wasn't weak, she was just seeing what she wanted to see. But the woman I'd become? She saw everything clearly now. My phone buzzed one last time, Lexi sending the daily numbers from both locations. Record sales again. Ready for the dinner rush? Aurora asked as we pulled up to the restaurant. Through the windows, I could see our staff preparing for service, laughing and working together like a real family. The sign above the door caught the setting sun, heart and lynches, no longer a reminder of betrayal, but a symbol of resilience. More than ready, I replied, stepping out into my new reality. We've got reservations to fill. The stage lights felt warm as I adjusted the microphone, facing the packed auditorium of the Women's Business Leadership Conference. In the front row, Aurora gave me a thumbs up, while Lexi and Sarah smiled encouragingly. Everyone expects me to start with how I lost everything, I began. But that's not my story. This is a story about finding something I never knew I had, my own power. The audience leaned forward as I continued. Yesterday, someone asked why I kept my ex-husband's name on the restaurant. They thought it was a reminder of betrayal. But Hart and Lynch's isn't about him anymore. It's about every woman who's ever been told to stay quiet, play nice, or give up. Movement at the back of the hall caught my eye. Andrea slipping in with her notebook, right on time. The restaurant industry isn't kind to women, I said. Neither is the justice system or the court of public opinion. But here's what I learned. We don't need their kindness. We need each other's strength. My phone vibrated in my pocket, probably another message from Lewis about Dominic's upcoming sentencing. It could wait. When I discovered my husband's betrayal, I had two choices, walk away or fight back. Walking away would have been easier. Fighting meant exposing everything, my mistakes, my blind spots, my broken marriage, but it also meant standing up for every woman who'd been silenced before me. In the audience, I spotted Jessica, Rachel, and Maria, Dominic's previous victims, now my closest allies. We'd formed a support network for women in similar situations, turning our shared pain into shared power. Today, Hart and Lynch's has 3 locations, I continued, each one run by a woman who refused to be pushed aside. Our kitchens are training grounds for female chefs who face discrimination. Our management program specifically recruits survivors of financial abuse. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes as I spoke. She'd become more than an ex-mother-in-law. She was now a partner in our mentorship initiative. But success isn't just about proving them wrong. It's about proving ourselves right. Every woman who walks into our restaurant sees the name and knows the story. Not just my story, our story, a story of resilience, community, and justice. The door opened again, and Hamza walked in, taking a seat in the back. Our eyes met briefly. After his failed takeover attempt, he'd learned an expensive lesson about underestimating women in business. His restaurant chain had taken a significant hit when our story went public. Last week, a young chef asked me if I regret not changing the restaurant's name after the divorce. I told her what I'm telling you now. That name isn't about the man who tried to steal my dream. It's about the women who helped me reclaim it. I gestured to my team in the audience. Lexi, who risked her career to stand with me. Aurora, who never doubted me for a second. Sarah, who chose truth over family loyalty. Andrea, who gave us a voice when others tried to silence us. The atmosphere in the hall was electric. I could see women taking notes, wiping tears, nodding in recognition of their own battles. The hardest part wasn't losing my marriage or fighting the legal battle. It was realizing that my biggest obstacle had been my own silence. We're taught to be grateful for scraps, to smile through disrespect, to doubt our own worth. Well, I'm done being grateful. I'm done being quiet. And I'm definitely done doubting. I pulled out the original business card, the one with both our names, that I'd saved from that first devastating day. This card represents who I was, a woman who thought she needed a man's name to succeed. But success isn't about whose name is on the door. It's about whose hands are doing the work, whose heart is in the fight, and whose truth is finally being heard. The applause started before I finished speaking. As women rose to their feet, I saw something in their eyes I recognized, the same fire that had driven me to fight back. So, yes, I kept the name Hart and Lynch's because every time someone asks about it, I get to tell this story. Not just my story, but the story of every woman in this room who's ever been told to make herself smaller. I held up my water glass. To all of us, the ones who stayed silent and the ones who spoke up, the ones still fighting and the ones who showed us the way. This is our time, our truth, our triumph. The standing ovation washed over me like a wave. In the back, Andrea was already typing, probably crafting tomorrow's headline. But the real story wasn't in the papers or the court records or even the restaurant's success. The real story was in the eyes of every woman in that room, finally seeing her own power reflected back at her. And that story, it was just beginning.